hold up the entire facility, whatever place you're working at. And so I hope after this COVID-19 virus, we're realizing how important it is, to support environmental services because they are the ones who hold it all together. I mean, everyone has a job to do within, but as I stated before, environmental services is the beginning as well as the end. So if you all do not start, then no one can do their job in that space. And so that is very important that we're not just passing by environmental services staff without acknowledging how important they are to patient care.
Dr. Carr, I love that you just used the word foundation, and that was almost verbatim with a conversation that I had with actually two candidates who are applying for jobs at my hospital. And I always like to look at any support service, primarily environmental services, but you think about the linen services, food service, maintenance, security, biomedical, transport. We hold the building up. And I explained it just as that. We support the building. And, I always like to say an example. I said, at any given moment, let's all of us just leave the hospital and we just walk out and we never come back. Doesn't matter how talented the doctors are, the nurses, how much money the institution has, how much technology, how much medicine. As hard as they work, we handle so much of the minutia that allows them to be successful that if we can't do our jobs right and we're not there to do it, or we're not funded, or we're not staffed appropriately, or we don't have the right tools and training, that hospital does not operate. And it does not take long for that building to shut down. So we are extremely vital, and for me, it's a matter of pride. It is a privilege to take care of our patients and our building, and it's not just about pulling a trash bag or sweeping a floor or wiping a bed down. What we do saves lives. And
Absolutely.
I'm very fortunate to have a team, by and large, that understands that and believes it too. And that's a huge help because they take ownership in their work, they take pride, and they see the end result that they are a vital cog in the machine.
That is so true. I second that.
One of the things I've also learned is having the tools to get the job done, being able to turn it on, turn it off quickly, being ready, being always ready. One thing I try to be at work is very, very calm, right? Because someone has to be calm, and if everyone is running in alarm mode, no one is going to think anything through. I've learned to be extremely calm under fire. And I've learned this process over many, many,
There's
many years.
emergency, and then there's panic.
Yes.
And there's two differences. So yes, calmness is important.
Making what's important very important and getting it done right away. And I'm trying to train my staff right now to be ahead of everything. One of the big words I'm using a lot with them is the word consistent. They have to be extremely consistent, and if they're not consistent, we'll be in panic mode when tragedy hits. We have to be ready. We have to have our tools. We just have to be ready. Liz?
Well, I agree with you, definitely. I think the one thing that we could have done a better job with to be prepared when we're speaking about tools is definitely we should have had more goggles. And goggles, talking about what we learned, we need more goggles. Talking about what the key takeaways are, well, every time we have a new employee start, we need to issue them goggles with their uniform, with their ID badge, and it should be part of their uniform.
Good point. I'm jotting that one down.
Because technically, and for safety, anytime you're cleaning above your shoulder, personal protective equipment for environmental services
Right.
should include goggles. So that I think is a good takeaway for all of us, for all EVS leaders, to make
Right.
sure that we're responsible and that we ensure that our team has the proper tools and the proper PPE always to make sure that they're safe while they're doing their job.
I
Right.
think that can be extended not just for goggles or eye protection. I think PPE as a whole. Now, our organization, we had challenges, but in the end, by and large, we never had a critical moment where we didn't have PPE. I saw on the news there were images of a particular health system in the city, a different one from the one that I work at, where they had to resort to using trash bags for isolation. And thankfully, the facility I work at, the organization I work at, we didn't have that problem. We didn't get to that point. But it made me realize that, if this happens again, and I'm pretty certain it's not a question of if, it's when, we need to be ready, because if the supply chain is ever disrupted again, we need to be able to provide our staff with the items that will protect them. So, I'm looking at, where do I have the bandwidth to buy not just eye protection, but I want to stockpile gloves. I want to stockpile gowns. I want to stockpile masks. I want to be able to have my own supply, because, if we have this run into it again, I want to be absolutely certain that we don't have to rely on a policy that would normally allow our staff to take from a unit and then that unit say, we don't have the bandwidth to support you anymore. I want to be completely autonomous in that regard. And if it means I dedicate a portion of my budget every month to buying extra and stockpiling it, then so be it. If it means that all of my team members, every single one of my team members will have what they need to protect themselves, then I did my job appropriately and I looked out for their safety.
So Jeff, good segue into the 72-hour emergency supply regulation.
Yes.
Right?
I
So
think that.
are we going to rethink that? And are we going to have to increase that? And then you also have to manage expiration dates and integrity of the
Yes.
equipment and the tools.
Yeah, first, I think that 72-hour, 96-hour standard, I think that's going to be dead. You really need to start looking at like 30-day, 60-day, 90-day in some cases. The expiration date is a good factor, and it's something that's important. Thankfully, a number of the products that we use actually have lengthy expiration dates. I know a lot of our hand sanitizer, for example, usually has, the lot numbers are marked with at least a 1.5 to 2 year shelf life. Gloves have a pretty lengthy expiration date. Hard reusable plastic safety glasses, safety goggles. You really shouldn't have any major defects, but still have to inspect it. But the point is, we have to start thinking long term. That 72-hour, 96-hour standard that used to be, either touted from, DOH or Joint Commission, we have to start thinking bigger than that. And
Sure,
make
because
sure that
the risk is different and new now. And the
Yes.
other thing is, while we're talking about it, we also have to mention that, yes, it's going to be important to build that stockpile, if you will, but it's also important that EVS leaders come up with a program or a way to rotate that backup stock, because
right.
you think about 6 months and 12 months down the road with these expiration dates, but February turned to March turned to April, and here we are in June. And if you had that 30, 60 day, 90 day stockpile and you did not tap into it, how do you start to and rotate that product and get that into your inventory for your team to use and then backfill that? Yeah.
It's just, Liz, you just took my thoughts out of my head, because one of the
I must be hanging out with you too much.
one of my own responsibilities as the assistant health coordinator at a Head Start program was to monitor our stockpile in case of an emergency. We did not have the food products, so we had to purchase shelf foods like tuna fish and green beans. And it's so important to avoid unnecessary loss of product, what we would do is, again, as you say, have the managers monitor the due dates. In the meantime, one of the new things that we will have to pay attention is not just looking at expiration date just for the purpose of throwing away, but also to monitor how long these items last while they're being used consistently within the hospital. So that will give you an idea of a date of when you should pull the backup stock. Like how long is it before we utilize it? And you want to make sure that it is actually used at least a month before its expiration date to produce the best possible use out of the items. So that's one of the things that I was thinking while you were thinking, like how can one of the key takeaways, monitoring, making sure that we're giving someone who should be solely responsible for making sure that these products are not wasted and we're not having hundreds and hundreds of dollars of items being wasted behind the scenes.
Well,
Sure.
one thing I think is at my organization, my director has created an alternative cleaning product which doesn't expire, and we also have let me not say it doesn't expire, but we use it on demand, so we wouldn't have a stockpile of it in a storeroom where it's going to expire. The second thing I noticed is we have now Purell, and people are using it more often. They're using Purell. So we're using it so much more that the expiration date most likely wouldn't expire, and they have a long shelf life. So the likelihood for it to be expired is highly unlikely in these times. Liz?
So would everybody agree that with the limitations and shortcomings of medical supply production and distribution systems, not just domestically but globally as well, if EVS leaders and organizations are not having these discussions amongst themselves and with their frontline team members, you're already behind. Would we all agree with that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Right, because
Absolutely.
So we highly encourage everyone to really look at these things and get your plan together, revise it, and make sure that this now moves up on the priority list, because I think either Jeff or Dion, you said this before, it's not, Jeff, I think it was you, it's not a question of when, but how soon, maybe how soon, what's the next thing that's going to come at us that we have to be able to respond to. And as Dion said, respond to, but calmly and strategically versus in a panic.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, Dion was mentioning before, watching on the news about the southern states, and I get it. People they're stir crazy. They want to get out. They want to try to get back at the normalcy in their lives. And, seeing these images of, people, going to water parks and having big block parties, and there's no masks, no social distancing. That's scary. And I even see it now. I live in Connecticut, and I get it. People are kind of fed up with it, but this is the point where it needs to be followed in order to save people's lives. And I talk with peers of mine from the industry. I've worked in other hospitals. I've worked for other companies. I still talk to a lot of the contacts I worked with over the years. I was actually invited to a conference call with one of my old directors, mentor of mine, and he's in Houston. Runs a multi-facility system in Harris County, and they were asking me, and this is right when the peak was happening. They were asking me, like, what are you doing? And I went through everything that we did as far as redistributing staff and ordering more trash cans, ordering bigger trash cans, so that way you don't have to worry about the trash overflowing.
Right.
Making sure that they're stockpiling masks and reusing and protecting their N95 masks in order to make sure that they get the most use out of them.
Right.
Everything like that, and just start stockpiling